in the kit as well, we will get our flaps. So basically, as I said before, for me, these two are going to be ganged up and they're going to go up together. So they're going to be elevons pretty much. But we have to attach these into the jet. So they come with the hinges sort of half pre-hinged like that. And then you got to insert them in here. So the way I'd like to do these is because I'd like to use epoxy to secure the hinges in there. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we don't get any epoxy into these hinges themselves. So what I'll do is I will coat that in, something like WD-40, put WD-40 in there, and in there, and then put some more slippery stuff like a grease or something around it. That way I know that, as epoxy from these holes splashes out, it's not actually gonna stick into the hinges. So I have sprayed just a good amount of WD-40 into the hinges here. I don't know if that's visible or not. Maybe on this one, yeah, you can kind of see the fluid in there. We're gonna do the same treatment to this guy right here. Let's start with some of this stuff, and just not too much, just a little to go in where the hinges are at, so that we don't get a problem where those guys are sticking to the epoxy. That is not what we want. So there we go. Cool. So now that surface is prepped, and I want to keep these sections clear of any lubricant, because that's what we're going to use to stick it. So here's the final result, and this wing is huge. So we're just going to set this somewhere to cure overnight. So it's the next day, and our hinges look like they are perfectly stuck on. So I'm not going to pull out, and that's good. So we're going to repeat that on the other wing, obviously, and then start to put in the linkages for these flap thingies. We're working through the wing, and time to actually mount the linkages onto the servos. So what I want to mention here is I made a couple of changes. First, I took out the blue servo arm, which is this guy, and we're using a red one, a 25T, which is the same as this one, the one on this end. 2, I added epoxy to the wood pieces, just to make sure that they actually stay in place. And now 3, we're going to start thinking about the linkages. So what we have here is whatever's left of my hardware package. Some of the screws I've used, some I haven't. But what's important is these rods here. So these are the rods, the linkage rods that come with the Eurofighter. And I know that I'm gonna need 4 of, so 2 per wing. And the distance between here and here is roughly about, 60, 70 millimeters or so. And it's pretty equal between this servo and this servo and linkage. So what I'm thinking is these are the rods that we're supposed to use, because there's 5 of them. There's only 2 of these super long ones. So I guess I'll figure out where those guys go. But I'm guessing that we're going to be using these guys right here. The 35 millimeter length rods. Versus the extra long ones are about, let's see, about 30, 40. I think I've figured out how these are going to mount up. So on the innermost flap, what I found was that In order to use the clevis, as I said, I had to have this on the inner side, and that doesn't work because this ball link is pretty large and it just interferes with the servo here. So what I had to do was use ball links on either end, and then that allows me to have a little bit of a misalignment because you can see this is not straight. It's kind of like that a little bit, but that's fine because there's two things I gotta figure out here. I gotta get that to fit, but I also need to get the cover that's gonna go over to fit. So that seems like it fits okay. The other side is a different story. So the servos are powered right now. I have my servo and it's currently in the neutral position. So what happens on the side is that the cover is got a very tight tolerance towards the outer side here. So if I try to mount this on the outer side, that ball link doesn't work because it interferes with the cover. So the cover doesn't work. So the only way to do that was to mount this on the inside, but since I'd already pre-drilled the hole out here, then that meant I had to use a ball link on the control surface. All to say that on the outermost aileron, I could have used sort of the clevis, and that would have worked well. But I didn't, and that's fine. So that brings me to the question of, well, doesn't that interfere with the servo? So it does, but what I found is that the travel that is required for this surface is a maximum of 30, and for this is a maximum of 40 millimeters. So I set them to both be 40 because, as I said earlier, I'm gonna just gang them up and have elevons. And with the servo on the inside, on the outer surface, I am able to get 40 millimeters of travel as measured from this point. Right here, I've set my gauge to measure 40 millimeters. And since the manual doesn't say where this is measured from, I'm gonna assume that it's measured from in between here. And so what I want is to show that I can actually get the full 40 with this setup of both the flap servos. So if I start to, right now there, I need to reverse stuff, but for now, if we just go move it, you can see that right there is 40 millimeters, and my servo still has some clearance to go, which is pretty good. So all that I'm gonna have to worry about is during setup is to make sure that my throws are set up correctly, but as far as the throws are concerned, with that servo, the travel that I get is exactly what I want. I'm pretty happy with that, and it seems as though all my covers now will fit correctly. So much for this setup. We could have used it at least on the outer, but that's gonna have to change. But for now, I think covers seem to fit well on both sides, so that makes me happy, and I'm gonna repeat this process on the other wing. These covers that come with the kit, and those are for these extensions, or rather to cover the linkage points here. And so what I'm gonna do is, the manual calls for epoxying these down, but I don't think I want to do that, and there's no good way to screw them down. The reason is, if I ever wanted to replace something, maybe if this guy broke or something, this has to be able to come out. I'm always worried about having to replace things. So what I'm gonna do, I think, is bond them with CA, because that allows me to have something that I can just break off if I need to get into those. So I'll bond them with CA, and then obviously I'm gonna have to check that the surfaces still move correctly. So I have added a servo reverser, so just to simulate what it looks like, and I think there's a bit of a misalignment, but that will be fixed once I actually connect these. But I'm happy with the results there, so that looks good. And what's left is, as I mentioned, gear and the pods that go at the tip.